Welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or if you're watching this on our rapidly growing YouTube channel, that's Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THL staff writer Brandon Peay. Joining me tonight from the Smith Center in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, is our very own publisher, Mr. Andrew Jones. And if you're watching this, then you probably already know North Carolina just tipped off its 2022-2023 basketball season and the 113th basketball season in program history when the Tar Heels beat UNC Wilmington in a closer than expected contest, 69-56. Carolina was led in scoring by R.J. Davis and Caleb Love, who had 17 points apiece. Armando Bacot contributed with 16 points, and probably what I think is the most shocking stat of the night, only 9 rebounds. Pete Nance and Leaky Black chipped in with 6 and 7 points respectively, but I thought both of them really showed what they could do defensively. But tonight, UNC really struggled offensively, and part of that was self-inflicted with some careless turnovers. But I think a lot of it is you got to give credit to UNCW and how they defended. UNC missed its first 10 of his first 14 shots, and it just seemed to be the offense just seemed to be stagnant all night. So what were your thoughts on the offensive woes tonight for the Tar Heels?
Well, they didn't look like they were all that in sync. They weren't very meshed. There was not a whole lot of fluidity. They had a couple of stretches where they had some good stuff. I thought Pete Nance, a couple of high post entries into Armando in the second half were impressive, and we're going to see a lot more of that down the road. There were some penetration and kickouts that weren't finished that would have added to more assists. I thought Caleb actually had an assist there in the second half. He didn't get credit for it, and I'd like to see that again, but it would just mean the number would go from 4 to 5. This was their lowest assist total in a game since 1980, when they were eliminated in the second round of the NCAA tournament by Texas A&M in a game that went to double overtime. And just for the record, Tar Heels did not score in the second overtime of that game. So they weren't pretty. It was sort of one of those forgetful, grind them out type wins where not a whole lot of good stuff is going on, but there's a lot of good stuff that comes out of it because they got a game, they got a lot of things on film. And to be perfectly honest with you, and we'll talk about this later on in the podcast, Brandon, but you don't want to look like you're in early April form on November 7th. The season plays out as long as it does for a reason. And these guys know it because they lived it last year. So there's a lot of stuff still to happen to this basketball team. There are a lot of things they have to get used to dealing with. For people on the outside looking in, they might think, well, gosh, Pete Nance was 14 and a half points a game at Northwestern, and he flowed really well, and he was a good passer there. Shouldn't be an issue for these guys. They've been around a long time. No, it takes time. They're a different team with Nance instead of Manic, a very different team. Watching from where I was on press row, they didn't look anything like they did a year ago a lot of the time because Nance is not a catch and shoot guy. A lot of his stuff originates from the post. So they're going to have to take some time to get used to it. Defending having an athletic team like UNCW, which is pretty long. They're very long in the 4, 3, and 2 spots. And so I thought that gave them a little bit of trouble. I thought the three-quarter full court press that wasn't full court, the three-quarter court press that UNCW used, I thought that's kind of slowed the Tar Heels down. They didn't really get into a rhythm. They had a couple turnovers against it, and they had some bad shots out of it. They didn't attack when they broke it very well. So actually, I thought that was really beneficial because there's a lot of stuff that Hubert can point to in the film room and say, okay, guys, if we want to be there in Houston that Monday night, here's all kinds of stuff that we now know that we need to work on fixing. And they'll do that. They will. They hit 2 3-pointers tonight. Think about it.
Yeah.
2 3-pointers. Okay, here's an amazing stat. The stats are pretty wild tonight, right?
Yeah.
Carolina had 18 personal fouls. That's more than they had offensive rebounds, assists, and made 3-pointers combined.
Wow.
Think about that for a minute. So it's one of those games, and that's okay. We tweet a lot, and I look at Twitter sometimes for humor, sometimes just to get a gauge on what people are saying, and it was pretty wild how people were dumping on them already tonight. So we'll hit on it again later on this podcast, Brandon, but it was November 7th. RJ actually looked pretty good if you want to look for a positive. I thought RJ did a pretty good job running the team, getting some shots. There were a couple possessions where he's like, guys, someone's got to score. someone's got to get a look, and he would get defenders on his hips and create some space for himself, got some stuff up off the glass. Caleb had a couple of those drives. I thought Seth Trimble finished on the break really well one time and then drew a foul and hit the free throw. So that's fine. No need to sound an offensive alarm. This is going to be a really good offensive team. People will look back at tonight and just say, that was one of 40 games.
Yeah, I agree. And they didn't play good offensively. They did play pretty well defensively. They matched UNCW's energy on defense. But I do believe UNCW had a very good defensive plan. They kept mixing up the defenses, forcing UNC to think on the fly offensively. And I think one thing that UNCW did well with their defensive energy, I think it led to them rebounding the ball very well. And I was halfway joking earlier when I said I was shocked that Armando Bacot only had 9 rebounds. But I think one thing that everyone who watched the game was shocked about was the fact that the Tar Heels were out rebounded by the Seahawks 37-32. And they were more than doubled up on the offensive glass, 16-7. From my vantage point, it just seemed like UNCW was just quicker to the ball. I don't think they weren't out jumping the Tar Heels. But what was your vantage point for the Tar Heels being out rebounded by UNCW tonight?
Yeah, I think that if there's anything that you might walk away if you're a Carolina fan saying, that was really kind of disappointing, it would be the glass. Now, it was 16-7 on the offensive glass, but UNCW missed a lot more shots than Carolina.
True.
That's part of it, but still 16-7. Hubert has said multiple times throughout the offseason, and as recently, I think as last Friday when we talked to him, that being better on the offensive glass was a major point of emphasis for this team. And they had a pretty good points per offensive rebound number last year as it went on through the season. They got much better at that, but they didn't rebound nearly as high a percentage of their misses as they had in previous years. So that was the mission. And they only had 7 offensive rebounds tonight. I think they attempted 40 out of 44 shots. I can't remember exactly how many shots they attempted, but they had a low percentage. And they produced, I think, like 1.6 points per offensive rebound, which is a nice number, but you want to grab a lot of misses, especially in a game where you miss a lot of shots, and they didn't do that. I think that the UNCW's, they had some length, they had some quickness, they got some long balls that caromed off the rim a little bit more. And Hubert actually said after the game that their physicality gave them some trouble on the defensive end and also on the glass. And I asked him specifically about the offensive rebounding, Brandon. And he just said, that's what it was. Now, as far as Armando goes, I asked him about not having a double-double. He just kind of shrugged it off. I said, you had a streak going there, and he did. He had 25 double-doubles in their last 30 games, or 25 double-figure rebound games in their last 30 games last year. He's the only player in college basketball history to have 6 double-doubles in the NCAA tournament. And here he is on November 7th against UNC Wilmington, and he goes 16-9. Yeah. That's fine. That's fine. It's actually kind of good in a lot of ways because these guys are hearing a lot of stuff. And Hubert said, and we'll get into this in a minute, but I guess I'm segueing into it now. Hubert said that he thought his team was anxious. They were trying to play up to something. And sometimes when you do that, something you're slow because you're thinking too much. You're not lucid, allowing yourself just to react. There were times I thought that they didn't look super quick, super bouncy tonight. And that when you're like that, you get out rebounded, or you don't do as well on the glass as you should. But when you're like that, you don't have great spacing on offense. You don't cut well. You don't find guys. The alertness is kind of jaded a little bit. And I thought we saw a lot of that tonight from these guys. And their offensive performance and on the glass stuff are examples of that. They were pretty good defensively, I thought. Yeah, they forced 2 shot clock violations, and there were 4 other possessions that got right down to it. And that doesn't include a possession at the end of the first half for UNC Wilmington where they kind of rushed a shot. And by the way, super sidebar here, Brandon, they had 4 guards on the floor.
Yeah, I saw
possession.
that.
In fact,
I actually wrote that in my notes.
UNCW's last 2 offensive possessions in the first half, Carolina had a 4-guard lineup on the floor, and it was a defensive lineup because they forced a turnover. The ball went out of bounds, and Hubert quickly made a sub. I think he pulled Trimble out and put Armando back in because it was Nance and 4 guards defensively. Yeah. So I thought that was kind of cool, seeing a little snippet of that. We saw some 3-guard stuff. We did a podcast the other day, Jacob, David and I told him, I said, guys, I think we're going to see some 3-guard stuff with this team, especially with Trimble. But what was interesting is the first 3-guard lineup we saw had Dunn on the floor, not Trimble. So we saw quite a bit of that. Maybe that was to match the quickness, to match the bounciness of UNCW. Not really sure. We'll see how things evolve over the course of time, what Hubert's thinking on the 3-guard lineup is. But I thought it was pretty cool that we got to see some of that stuff tonight.
Yes, AJ, we did. That's one thing Hubert Davis did say he was going to do more of this season is play around with the lineups a little bit more. But tonight, the 3 things hasn't been very positive, AJ. Between North Carolina being out rebounded, the offensive struggles along with this game didn't play out the way the folks in Vegas thought it would play out. So we'll do this. So I have to ask you this. What does it mean for this UNC team? Should fans be worried about this, or what does this mean?
The reason we focused on 2 negatives to begin with is because those things stood out. They have to be addressed because that's what people are going to take from it. People looking around the country say, "God, 69 to 56, whatever." That wasn't very impressive. But in February, no one's going to care.
Yeah.
I actually think I think being forced to play out of your comfort zone. Sometimes if it's self-induced, sometimes it's for the other team does it, especially in November and December, is really good for teams. It's very healthy for them, especially this group, because the last time these kids took the floor was in New Orleans. I was courtside for that. It was an unbelievable spectacle. And the last time Caleb had taken a shot in a real game was that 3 that missed with Justin McCoy sent a screen because Armando was no longer in there because of the injury. So they were trying to get a shot missed. Game doesn't go to overtime, ends in regulation. They blew a 15-point lead at halftime in the national championship game. That's the last time they played in a real game, because the exhibition game wasn't a real game. So, I would think that the combination of the hype and that, even though the building had great energy tonight, I mean, I commented to a few people, and I may have tweeted it too.
Yeah,
during player intros, it seemed like an ACC game.
Yeah,
it's like, hey, this is Virginia Tech here in mid-January. That's what it felt like and sounded like. And I think the players sensed that, and I think that made them a little bit more anxious, going back to what Hubert said, that they were trying to play up to that. They know what the press clippings say. You can't keep it from them. Back in the old days, Dean could keep the newspapers out of the players' lounge, and that would keep them from knowing stuff. Now, it's all right here, man.
Yeah.
Everything is right there. So you can't hide it from them. So you teach them how to deal with it. Tonight was a great lesson in that, in a lot of ways. And it was good for them just to kind of get it out of the system. Game 1, November 7th. They got to win. UNCW is a club that won 24 games last year, won the CBI. They got 8 new kids in the team, but these are kids that played a lot. A really good player from North Dakota State. They got a transfer from Ole Miss. They have some dudes.
They go to school.
They're going to be pardon me?
I said they also go to school for free.
They also go to school for free. Yes, they play the sport as well. So what does this mean? It's game 1. Don't worry. Don't freak out. Don't make judgments on players based on tonight. Don't say, gosh, Pete Nance only had 6 points. He's really not that good. He's not Brady Manick. Don't do any of that stuff. He isn't Brady Manick. They're totally different players, and this team's going to have to learn to play a little bit new and different. They're going to have more stuff coming off the bench. Styles didn't play a lot, but my gracious, he's bouncy.
Yeah.
And if Jalen Washington is ever fully ready to go, the things I'm hearing about him is he'll help immediately. Bouncy, skilled. They haven't had a guy like that around here for a while. I thought DeMarco Dunn had some pretty good bounce and a confident looking shot. Didn't go down, but it's still confident. And Seth Trimble gives them an edge when he comes off the bench. He's going to be instant energy off the bench. It's not going to be a great scorer. He can attack and score that way, but he's not a real good shooter yet. But he can distribute. He can defend his rear end off. He's going to be really good in the open court. So they're going to be fine. This is a really, really good situation for them because, if they come in here and win by 50 points, what's Hubert talking about tomorrow?
Yeah.
He's trying to bring them down. Now, trying to bring them up. Quick story before we go. So Armando said in the locker room that he's like, yeah, RJ didn't play well. Caleb, you didn't play well. Leaky, you didn't play well. I didn't play well. Pete didn't play well. So there was some negativity by the players, and Hubert comes in and it's all positive. You got to win. Winning's hard. They know how hard it is because they lost 10 times last year. Yeah. So that kind of got them gathered mentally, emotionally, whatever. So I think all that stuff's good. They got the first, it's like your first day of work, at a new job. You don't know where the cafeteria is, you don't know where the restroom is, and everything is just kind of what the heck. And then a few weeks later, you instinctively walk out your office door and you know where everything is, right?
Yeah.
Sports can be that way too, even in basketball, especially when chemistry is so paramount. And even though these guys, so many of them played together before, it's a new, different group with a slightly different approach. So fans should be okay with it. They got to win. They got a game under their belts. They're one game closer to becoming what they're eventually going to become. And their mission statement is to be a national champion. I think they have that in them. And they're going to have to go through some nights like this where they're in order to become that national champion.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. I think they are in a really good situation because I think the best thing for a team is when you lose and you play bad, but you still win, and there's just so many teachable moments because there's still a lot of new faces on this team. So I think that tonight was an overall positive thing for the Tar Heels. But that's good stuff, AJ. I think that's a good point to wrap it up.
And all that stuff will be addressed. I mean, it's November 7th. Let's not forget that. The NCAA tournament starts in 4 months and 1 week. So that's what is that? 12, it's 13. I don't know how many damn weeks. How many weeks is that? 4 months and 1 week. That's 18 weeks.
Yeah.
18 weeks. Think about what you were doing 18 weeks ago. That's how much time into the future it's going to be. If they get to Houston, the Final Four that's 37 more games because they would play 40 games if they get to the national championship. So they have 37 more games to play before they get to Houston.
Yeah, good.
Pump the brakes and allow this to play itself out.
Pump the brakes. So again, North Carolina with the season opening 69-56 win over UNCW. I've been Brandon Peay. He's been Andrew Jones. Thank you for watching.